Hello friends, today we will compare Chipotle Mexican Grill with Starbucks. Not the food, not the drinks, but the companies. We will compare the financial situation, the valuation of the stocks. Basically, we will try to answer a very simple but not easy question. What is a better investment opportunity? Chipotle or Starbucks? So let's do it. Individual insiders own 0.7% of Chipotle and 2.1% of Starbucks. So when it comes to the management having its skin in the game, Starbucks is a clear winner. And are individual insiders buying recently? That is an X for Chipotle and an X for Starbucks. Individual insiders are not buying any shares of those companies in the recent months. And the super investors own those companies. There are 2 super investors owning Chipotle and 7 super investors owning shares of Starbucks. So it's another check for Starbucks. And are super investors buying those stocks recently? That is an X for Chipotle, but it is a check for Starbucks. So the final score when it comes to investors is 0 points for Chipotle and 3 points for Starbucks. Return on invested capital. It is 12.7% for Chipotle and 31.3% for Starbucks. So it's a check for Starbucks and it is an incredible result. That really shows that the management knows how to invest capital. And net profit margin, it is 12.4% for Chipotle and 11.4% for Starbucks. So it's a check for Chipotle, even though the difference is not huge. And now let's take a look at share buyback. Chipotle bought back 12.5% of its shares in the last 10 years, and Starbucks bought back 24.6% at the same time. So it is a win for Starbucks. Both companies are creating value for long-term shareholders by buying back the stock, but Starbucks is doing it on a massive scale. And how many years will it take for each company to pay back its debt? Well, Chipotle does not have any debt, and for Starbucks it is over 4 years, so it's a clear win for Chipotle. And the final score when it comes to the financial health is 2 points for Chipotle and 2 points for Starbucks. It's a draw. Revenue growth of Chipotle is 11.9% and for Starbucks it is 9.2%. So it's a check for Chipotle Mexican Grill. Okay, and let's take a look at free cash flow growth. For Chipotle it is 14% and in case of Starbucks it is only 7.6%, so another check for Chipotle. And finally, when it comes to growth, let's take a look at earnings per share. Chipotle is growing by 15.5% and Starbucks by 11%. So it's a slam dunk for Chipotle. It is quite obvious that even though Starbucks is growing nicely, Chipotle is doing that much faster. Okay, and the final score when it comes to growth is of course 3 points for Chipotle and 0 points for Starbucks. The dividend yield for Chipotle is 0% and for Starbucks it is 3.1%. So it's not only a check for them, but actually they will get all the checks because Chipotle Mexican Grill does not pay dividends currently. And it all makes sense. They are growing much faster because they are using all their earnings to generate growth. Starbucks is a bigger company, it's growing a bit slower, and so they can afford to pay out dividends. So the payout ratio for Starbucks is 61.5% and the dividend growth is 9.8%. So those numbers are really impressive. Dividends are high, but nothing that this company couldn't handle, and it is also growing very nicely. So the final score concerning dividends is 0 points for Chipotle and 3 points for Starbucks. Now let's try to compare the valuations of both companies, and to do that we will use an average intrinsic value per share. In videos in which I analyze companies, I always create 3 scenarios of future growth and end up with 3 different prices. So that is the average of those 3 prices after applying 30% margin of safety. So the average intrinsic value per share of Chipotle is around $17, and the current share price is closer to $62. So that is an X because the current share price is higher than the average intrinsic value. So the company is overvalued. And when we look at Starbucks, we see that the average intrinsic value is around $33 and the current share price is $77, so it is also an X. But now let's look at the percentage difference between current share price and the intrinsic value. And for Chipotle it is 71% and for Starbucks it is 56%. The difference between the current price and the intrinsic value is smaller for Starbucks, so it's a win for them. And the final score for the valuation is 0 points for Chipotle and 1 point for Starbucks. So now let's take a look at the final results. Investors, it is 0 points for Chipotle and 3 points for Starbucks. Financial health, 2 points for Chipotle and 2 points for Starbucks. Growth, 3 points for Chipotle and no points for Starbucks. Dividends, 0 points for Chipotle and 3 points for Starbucks. And valuation, 0 points for Chipotle and 1 point for Starbucks. So the final score of our little game is 5 points for Chipotle and 9 points for Starbucks. So it seems like a clear win for Starbucks, but it really depends on what we are focusing as investors. If you are looking for fast growth, then Chipotle is a much better alternative. And the fact that they have a similar score when it comes to financial health just shows that it is not a case of a strong company versus a weak one. They are just different. They are at a different point in their history. And if you want to concentrate on dividends and you also take into consideration the valuation, then Starbucks seems more interesting. Also, if we go to our Stock Ranking Pro, we can filter all the companies to just see Chipotle and Starbucks. And now we can go to the end where all the scores are calculated. And we can see that when it comes to overall score, Starbucks is much better than Chipotle. But if we take a look at Chipotle's overview, we see that only the dividends and partly investors are weak. Other than that, it is a very good company. If you want to learn more about Chipotle, you can find my analysis of this company here. And if you want to learn more about Starbucks, then the video about it is here. Thank you so much for watching and see you in the next one.